The ball hung in the air like a promise waiting to be broken. Under the blazing lights of the Oregon State Championship Finals, Hannah Kim crouched low at the net, her small frame dwarfed by the towering hitters on both sides. The entire gym held its breath, 3,000 people watching a girl who'd spent 3 years being invisible. Her heart hammered against her ribs as memories of every dismissive comment. Every time she'd been overlooked, every practice where she'd stood alone flooded back. This wasn't just about volleyball anymore. This was about proving that the quiet Korean girl from the suburbs of Portland could be the difference between victory and heartbreak. The scoreboard glowed 24-23, championship point and everything her family had sacrificed, the early morning drives. The second jobs, the belief in their daughter when no one else would, came down to this moment. But 12 hours earlier, Hannah Kim was still just the girl nobody noticed. The one who rotated in for defense and rotated out before anyone could remember her name. The one who ate lunch alone while her teammates laughed at inside jokes she'd never be part of. Yet sometimes, the most powerful voices are the ones that speak through action, and sometimes the quietest players make the loudest statements when it matters most. This is the story of how silence became strength, how being overlooked became an advantage, and how one impossible block changed everything. Not just for a championship, but for a girl who finally found her voice in the most unexpected way. Hello my friends. Before we continue our story, leave your like, share the story, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Beaverton, Oregon, sits in the shadow of Portland like a younger sibling trying to find its own identity. It's the kind of place where strip malls blend into suburban neighborhoods, where families move for good schools and safe streets, where diversity means the Korean BBQ restaurant shares a parking lot with the Mexican grocery store. The Sunset High School Apollos weren't exactly volleyball royalty, but in a state where the sport runs deep, they commanded respect. Friday nights belonged to football, but Tuesday and Thursday evenings, that's when the volleyball faithful packed the gym, and winning league championships was serious business. Hannah Kim had been around volleyball her entire life, but she'd never really been part of it. Her parents, Dr. James Kim and nurse practitioner Grace Kim, had immigrated from Seoul before Hannah was born, carrying dreams wrapped in medical degrees and a work ethic that bordered on relentless. They lived in a modest split level on Oak Street, where her mother's nursing scrubs hung next to her father's white coats, and dinner conversations mixed Korean and English in equal measure. Hannah was their only child, born after years of fertility struggles, and they'd poured every hope into her quiet frame. Volleyball will teach you to speak up, her mother had said when Hannah first joined the youth league at 12. Americans, they are loud. You must learn to be loud too. But 5 years later, Hannah remained stubbornly soft-spoken, more comfortable listening than leading, more inclined to observe than command. At 17, she stood 5'6" with quick reflexes and an uncanny ability to read the game, but her voice rarely rose above a whisper during timeouts. Her teammates weren't mean to her, they simply forgot she existed. The Sunset High gym smelled like floor wax and teenage ambition. Coach Patricia Martinez, a former Oregon State middle blocker, ran practices like military drills, demanding perfection from her starting six while the bench players scraped for attention. Hannah had been trapped in volleyball purgatory for 3 years, too skilled for JV, too invisible for varsity stardom. She was the defensive specialist who rotated in for back row coverage, the girl who kept rallies alive but never got credit for kills. Good dig, Kim, Coach Martinez would grunt, already looking past her to the hitters who would get the glory. Tuesday's practice was typical. Star outside hitter Mackenzie Walsh spiked balls like she was angry at them. Middle blocker Jessica Torres commanded the net with 6-foot frame, and setter Riley O'Connor orchestrated plays with the confidence of someone destined for a Division I scholarship. Hannah rotated through drills quietly, her digs consistent but unspectacular, her blocks solid but overshadowed. When practice ended, the starters clustered around Coach Martinez discussing weekend plans while Hannah gathered balls, alone, invisible, as always. That's when everything changed. Kim. Coach Martinez's voice cut through the gym chatter. Stay after. We need to talk. Hannah's stomach dropped. Conversations that started this way usually ended with position changes or worse. As her teammates filed out, chattering about homecoming plans and college visits, Hannah stood alone under the fluorescent lights, wondering if her volleyball career was about to end before it had really begun. But sometimes, the universe has different plans, and sometimes opportunity arrives, disguised as bad news. Coach Martinez sat on the bleachers, her weathered clipboard balanced on her knees, studying Hannah with the intensity of someone solving a puzzle. 3 years you've been here, Kim. 3 years of solid defense. Zero drama, and absolutely no noise. You know what I realized today? Hannah shook her head, afraid to speak. In 3 years, you've never once complained about playing time. Never once questioned a rotation. Never once demanded attention. That tells me something about your character. The gym felt cavernous with just the two of them, the echo of their voices bouncing off empty bleachers. Here's the situation, Coach Martinez continued, her tone shifting to business. Jessica's shoulder is worse than we thought. She's out for 6 weeks minimum, maybe the season. That leaves us with a hole at middle blocker going into league play. Hannah's heart raced. Middle blocker was a position for tall, aggressive players, not quiet defensive specialists. I know what you're thinking. You're not 6 feet tall, you don't spike like Mackenzie, and you've never been a primary blocker. But you know what you do have? Court sense. You read attacks better than anyone I've coached, and your timing is flawless. The opportunity felt surreal. Hannah's parents had sacrificed everything for her education, working double shifts to afford club volleyball and private lessons. Her father picked up weekend shifts at the urgent care clinic. Her mother worked nights at the hospital. Also, Hannah could chase a dream that had seemed increasingly impossible. This isn't charity, Kim, Coach Martinez said firmly. League championships are won on defense, and you're the best pure defender I have. But playing middle blocker means talking. It means calling out attackers, organizing the block, being vocal. Can you do that? Friday night arrived, with the weight of expectations Hannah had never felt before. The Sunset High Gym buzzed with energy as league play opened against the West Lynn Lions, a team that had knocked them out of playoffs the previous year. Hannah's parents sat in the front row, her mother clutching a homemade sign that read, "Go Hannah," in careful English lettering. Her father had left work early for the first time in months, his medical badge still clipped to his shirt. They'd never asked Hannah to be anything other than her best, but she could see the pride in their eyes as she walked onto the court as a starter. Warm-ups felt different when you were in the starting rotation. Instead of watching from the sideline, Hannah found herself at the net, working on blocking drills with the intensity of someone who belonged there. Her teammates seemed surprised but supportive. Riley O'Connor even complimented her timing during a combination drill. "Nice hands," Hannah Mackenzie Walsh said after a successful block. It was the first time the star player had used her first name instead of just Kim. Small victories, but for Hannah, they felt monumental. The whistle blew, and West Lynn served. The first ball of the season, Hannah rotated to the back row initially, playing her familiar defensive role, but she knew that in 3 rotations, she'd be front and center as the middle blocker. Her digs were sharp and controlled, keeping rallies alive while her teammates scored points. But with each rotation, the moment of truth approached. When she finally stepped to the net as the primary middle blocker, her heart hammered so loudly, she was sure the entire gym could hear it. The first attack came fast. West Lynn's outside hitter wound up for a cross-court kill. Hannah read the approach, timed her jump perfectly, and watched the ball ricochet off her hands and back into the Lions' court for a block kill. The Sunset crowd erupted, and for the first time in her volleyball career, Hannah Kim felt what it was like to be the reason people were cheering. But this was only the beginning, and she had no idea that by season's end, she'd discover that sometimes the quietest players have the loudest impact when everything is on the line. October in Oregon meant rain that drummed against the gym windows during practice, the kind of steady downpour that made the outside world feel distant and unreal. Hannah's new role as starting middle blocker brought responsibilities she'd never faced, calling out attack patterns, organizing defensive rotations, being the anchor around which the entire front row rotated. Her voice, barely above a whisper for most of her life, now had to carry across the court during crucial rallies. Outside, she'd call, pointing to the approaching hitter. Quick middle. But her commands often got lost in the noise, and Coach Martinez constantly reminded her to project. The academic pressure was mounting to Anna carried a 4.0 GPA, while taking AP courses her parents insisted would open doors to top universities. Between volleyball practice, homework, and her part-time job helping her father's medical office with Korean translations, sleep became a luxury. She'd arrive at school by 6 a.m. for open gym, attend classes until 3 p.m., practice until 6 p.m., then study until midnight. Her parents, despite their pride in her volleyball success, never let her forget that education came first. Volleyball is temporary, her mother would say in Korean, while packing Hannah's lunch. Knowledge is forever. Socially, Hannah remained on the periphery despite her elevated status on the team. Her teammates respected her play, but still clustered. In groups, she couldn't quite penetrate. They talked about parties she wasn't invited to, shared inside jokes from middle school friendships she'd never been part of. During lunch, she still sat alone, watching Mackenzie Walsh hold court with the popular crowd while she ate her mother's homemade kimbap in silence. The irony wasn't lost on her. She could communicate with teammates on the court, but off the court, she remained invisible. The physical demands of playing middle blocker were taking their toll. Hannah's shoulders ached from constant jumping and hitting. Her knees protested after particularly intense blocking drills. She was smaller than typical middle blockers, which meant she had to jump higher and time her blocks perfectly to be effective. Ice baths became routine, as did the heating pad her mother would place on her shoulders while she studied. "You're pushing too hard," her father warned one evening, watching her wince as she reached for a textbook. But Hannah couldn't slow down. Not when everything she'd worked for was finally within reach. The real test came during a road trip to Bend for a weekend tournament. Sharing hotel rooms with teammates forced Hannah into social situations she'd avoided for years. While her roommates stayed up late talking about boys and college plans, Hannah lay awake, listening, feeling like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. She learned that Mackenzie had already received scholarship offers from 3 Division I schools, that Riley's parents were pushing her towards Stanford, that even the bench players had dreams bigger than Sunset High School. During the tournament, Hannah's performance was inconsistent. Her blocks were solid, but her attacking suffered under pressure. In the semifinals against Jesuit High, she missed 2 crucial quick attacks that cost them momentum. As they lost in straight sets, Hannah sat on the bench afterward, watching her teammates console each other while she remained apart, wondering if she was holding them back. The car ride home was quiet, and for the first time since becoming a starter, Hannah questioned whether she belonged in the spotlight or if she was destined to remain in the shadows. But the lowest point came the following Monday during practice. While working on combination plays, Hannah mistimed a quick set and collided with Riley O'Connor, sending the setter sprawling to the gym floor. Riley's ankle twisted awkwardly, and she couldn't put weight on it. As the trainer examined Riley's injury, Hannah stood frozen, knowing that her mistake might have cost them their most important player. The guilt was crushing. She'd finally earned her teammates' respect, only to potentially destroy their championship hopes with one careless moment. Sometimes the quiet ones hurt the loudest when they make mistakes, and Hannah felt the weight of that silence more than ever. The ankle injury wasn't as serious as everyone feared. Riley would miss only 2 weeks, not the season. But those 2 weeks forced the team to rebuild around backup setter Morgan Hayes, a junior who had raw talent but lacked Riley's court vision and leadership. Hannah found herself in an unexpected position, the experienced voice on the court. the player her teammates looked to for stability. For the first time in her volleyball career, being quiet wasn't an option. "Hannah, you need to talk more," Coach Martinez said during a particularly difficult practice. "Morgan's learning, but she needs direction. You see the court better than anyone? Share what you see." The suggestion terrified Hannah more than any spike or dig. Talking meant being wrong sometimes, meant having opinions that others might challenge. But as she watched her teammates struggle with timing and communication, she realized that her silence wasn't protecting her, it was hurting everyone. The breakthrough came during a home match against Lake Oswego, down 2-1. The team huddled during a timeout, frustration evident on every face. Hannah looked around at her teammates, girls who had become more than just volleyball players to her, who had started including her in conversations and asking her opinion on plays. Something shifted inside her. A recognition that belonging wasn't something you waited to receive, but something you earned by contributing. "I know what they're doing," she said, her voice stronger than usual. "Their middle is cheating outside. On every quick set, if Morgan can get me the ball fast, I can tool the block." The strategy worked. Hannah's kill down the line sparked a comeback that sent the crowd to their feet. But, more importantly, her teammates started looking to her for reads and adjustments. By the time Riley returned from injury, the team had developed a new dynamic. Hannah wasn't just the quiet girl who dug balls anymore. She was the defensive anchor who could predict attacks and organize the block. Riley even deferred to her on certain defensive calls, recognizing that Hannah's court sense was elite. The community began to notice too. Local newspaper coverage that had focused exclusively on Mackenzie's hitting statistics started mentioning Hannah's defensive contributions. The Oregonian ran a small feature about the silent guardian of Sunset High's volleyball team, describing how her court awareness and blocking had transformed the team's defense. Hannah's parents framed the article and hung it in their living room, next to her father's medical school diploma and her mother's nursing awards. More importantly, Hannah discovered that her teammates had been watching her all along. "You're like a volleyball computer," Mackenzie told her after practice one day. "You see patterns none of us catch." Jessica Torres, whose position Hannah had essentially inherited, admitted that Hannah read attacks better than she ever had. "I was all power," Jessica said during one of her rehab visits. "You're all intelligence. The team needs that." These conversations revealed that being overlooked hadn't meant being undervalued. Her teammates had simply been waiting for her to step forward. The revelation came full circle during a team dinner at Coach Martinez's house. As the girls shared stories about their volleyball journeys, Hannah found herself speaking up, contributing to conversations instead of just listening. When Mackenzie talked about pressure to earn a scholarship, Hannah shared her own fears about balancing family expectations with personal dreams. When Riley discussed the challenges of leadership, Hannah offered insights about reading teammates, body language, and anticipating their needs. For the first time, she wasn't on the outside looking in, she was part of the conversation, part of the team, part of something bigger than herself. Practice intensity ramped up as playoffs approached. Hannah's blocking had improved dramatically. Her timing was perfect, and her communication had become essential to the team's defensive schemes. But more than individual skills, she had found her voice. Not the loud, aggressive voice of a typical middle blocker, but her own voice, thoughtful, observant, and quietly confident. As Coach Martinez watched her direct traffic at the net during a scrimmage, she smiled. Sometimes, the best leaders aren't the loudest ones, and sometimes, the most powerful voices are the ones that speak only when they have something important to say. The Oregon 6A State Championship semifinals arrived with the weight of an entire season's dreams. The neutral site at Liberty High School in Hillsborough buzzed with energy as teams from across the state converged for the weekend tournament. Hannah's parents had taken time off work, both of them, simultaneously, for the first time in years, and sat with a growing contingent of Sunset supporters who had made the drive to watch their Apollo girls chase history. The gym smelled like anticipation and floor wax, and warming up felt different when you knew that only 4 teams remained. Their opponent, Central Catholic, brought a tradition of excellence and a front line that averaged 6 feet per player. Hannah studied their attack patterns during warm-ups, noting how their outside hitters approached, where their middle blocker liked to attack, how their setter distributed the ball under pressure. This was the level of analysis that had become second nature to her, the quiet preparation that happened while others were getting psyched up. "They're running a lot of quick middle," she told Coach Martinez during the final team meeting. "Their middle blocker is lefty, so she's going to attack sharp angle. I can take that away if Riley can help on the double block." The match began, with Hannah rotating to the back row, where she felt most comfortable. Her digs were sharp and purposeful, keeping rallies alive while Mackenzie and the pin hitters scored points. But volleyball is a game of rotations, and eventually, she found herself at the net as the primary middle blocker. The crowd noise seemed to fade as she focused on reading the Central Catholic setter's hands, watching for the quick set that she knew was coming. When it arrived, Hannah's timing was perfect. She rose with the Central Catholic middle blocker and deflected the attack back for a block kill that sent the Sunset crowd into a frenzy. Set 2 was a battle of adjustments. Central Catholic's coach had noticed Hannah's reads and started running decoy plays to confuse her timing. But Hannah adapted, communicating with her teammates about what she was seeing, calling out attack patterns even when she wasn't sure. "Quick middle coming," she'd shout, and even when she was wrong, her teammates appreciated the information. Her voice, which had been barely audible at the season's start, now carried clearly across the court. The transformation wasn't just in volume, it was in confidence, in the authority that comes from knowing your role and executing it perfectly. The third set brought the pressure that separates champions from runners. Every point mattered, every rally could shift momentum, every mistake could end a season. With Sunset leading 20-18, Central Catholic went on a run, scoring 5 straight points to take a 23-20 lead. The gym fell silent except for the visiting crowd's celebration. During the timeout, Hannah looked around at her teammates' faces. They weren't panicked, but they were pressing, trying to force plays instead of trusting their training. "We're still reading them perfectly," she told the huddle. "Trust the system. Trust each other." The comeback started with Hannah's serve, a short spinning ball that caught Central Catholic's libero off guard. Then came the defensive rally that defined her season. Central Catholic's outside hitter wound up for a cross-court kill, the kind of attack that had been scoring all night. But Hannah had been watching, learning, anticipating. She knew the hitter's tendencies, knew the angle, knew exactly where to position herself. Her dig was perfect, sending the ball high and controllable to Riley, who set Mackenzie for a kill that made it 23-21. 2 more rallies, 2 more perfectly executed defensive plays, and suddenly they were at deuce. The gym was electric, with both crowds on their feet for every point. Central Catholic had championship point at 24-23. Their setter looking for the kill that would end Sunset's season. The quick set went to their middle blocker, the sharp angling lefty that Hannah had scouted all match. But this time, Hannah was ready. She read the approach perfectly, timed her jump to perfection, and rose above the net with absolute confidence. The block was emphatic, sending the ball rocketing back to Central Catholic's court for the kill that tied the match at 24-24. The final 2 points felt like destiny. Hannah's block had shifted all momentum, and Sunset rode that wave to a 2-6-2-4 victory that sent them to the state championship final. As her teammates mobbed her at the net, Hannah realized that this was what she'd been preparing for her entire life, not just the volleyball skills, but the moment when quiet strength becomes loud impact, when being overlooked becomes an advantage, when finding your voice means using it at exactly the right time. Tomorrow would bring the ultimate test, but tonight belonged to a girl who had learned that sometimes the most powerful statements are made not with words, but with actions that speak louder than any voice ever could. Championship Saturday arrived. Gray and drizzling. Typical Oregon weather that seemed to mirror the nervous energy building inside the Memorial Coliseum in Portland. This was the big stage, the venue where the Portland Trail Blazers played. where Hannah had watched college tournaments as a kid, dreaming of moments exactly like this one. Their opponent, Sheldon High from Eugene, came with a perfect record and a reputation for clutch performances. They'd won 3 of the last 5 state titles, and their starting lineup featured 2 Division I commits and a setter who'd already signed with Oregon. Hannah's parents arrived early, carrying a Korean flag alongside their Go Apollos sign, a gesture that made Hannah's throat tight with emotion. Her extended family had driven up from California, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, who'd only heard about her volleyball career through phone calls and social media posts. Seeing them in the stands, wearing sunset purple and carrying homemade signs with Korean and English cheering phrases, reminded Hannah that this moment represented more than just volleyball. It was about dreams that had traveled across an ocean, sacrifices made by people who believed in possibilities they couldn't even imagine. The warm-up felt surreal under the bright arena lights, with college scouts scattered throughout the stands and local media recording every spike and dig. Hannah went through her pre-match routine, studying Sheldon's attack patterns, noting their hitters' approaches, communicating observations to her teammates. But there was something different about her preparation today. Instead of the nervous energy that had defined her earlier in the season, she felt calm, centered, ready. 3 years of being overlooked had prepared her for this moment when everyone would be watching. Coach Martinez gathered the team for final instructions, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "We've prepared for this all season," she said, looking each player in the eye. "Trust your training, trust each other, and play with the heart that got us here." When her eyes met Hannah's, there was a moment of recognition. The quiet kid who'd been ignored for 3 years was now the defensive anchor they couldn't succeed without. "Hannah, I need you to be our voice out there. The court is bigger. The crowd is louder, but your reads are what make us special. Don't be afraid to be heard." The first set was a feeling-out process, both teams testing each other's strengths and weaknesses. Hannah started in the back row, where her digs kept rallies alive and gave her teammates opportunities to score. Sheldon's attack was sophisticated, quick tempo, multiple options, designed to confuse blockers and defenders. But Hannah had spent her entire career watching volleyball, analyzing patterns, understanding the subtle cues that most players missed. She could see what Sheldon was trying to do, and, more importantly, she knew how to counter it. When she rotated to the front row as the middle blocker, everything felt different. The arena lights seemed brighter, the crowd noise louder, the pressure more intense than anything she'd experienced. Sheldon's middle blocker was 6'2" and had already committed to Washington, everything Hannah wasn't supposed to be able to compete with. But as the first quick attack came her way, Hannah realized that height meant nothing if you couldn't read the play. Her block was clean and decisive, sending the ball back for a kill that announced to everyone watching that Sunset's middle blocker belonged on this stage. The second set brought adjustments from both teams. Sheldon's coach had clearly studied film of Hannah's defensive patterns and started running plays designed to exploit her positioning. But Hannah's greatest strength wasn't her physical ability, it was her adaptability, her ability to recognize changes and counter them in real time. When Sheldon tried to isolate her with their quick hitter, Hannah called for help from her pin blockers. When they ran combination plays to confuse her reads, she trusted her instincts and made the right call, more often than not, by the third set. The match had evolved into a chess match between 2 evenly matched teams. Every rotation mattered, every substitution carried strategic weight. Every point felt like it could determine the championship. Hannah found herself in constant communication with her teammates, calling out attack patterns, organizing defensive coverage, being the voice that tied everything together. This was the player she'd become over the course of the season. Not the loudest person on the court, but the most trusted, the most reliable, the one her teammates looked to when the pressure was highest. The fourth set would decide everything. After splitting the first 3 sets, both teams knew that this was winner-take-all volleyball. Hannah's parents sat on the edge of their seats, her mother clutching her father's hand as every rally unfolded. The extended family that had driven up from California was on their feet, cheering in Korean and English, creating a pocket of support that Hannah could feel even over the arena noise. This was what she'd worked for her entire life, not just the volleyball success, but the moment when all the sacrifices, all the quiet preparation, all the overlooked contributions would matter more than anything else in the world. The final point came exactly as Hannah had always imagined it would, not with a spectacular kill or ace serve, but with the kind of defensive play that had defined her entire career. Sheldon had championship point, 24-23, and their outside hitter wound up for a cross-court attack that seemed destined to end Sunset's dream season. The crowd held its breath as the ball left the hitter's hand, traveling at a speed and angle that would have overwhelmed most defenders. But Hannah had been reading this hitter all match, studying her approach, anticipating her favorite shots. The dig was perfect, high-controlled right to Riley for a back-row attack that kept them alive, and ultimately led to a 26-24 victory that brought the first state championship in Sunset High. Volleyball history. In the immediate aftermath, Hannah disappeared into a mob of teammates, parents, and coaches who had waited years for this moment. Her parents reached her first, her mother crying tears that mixed Korean and English expressions of pride, her father speechless in a way she'd never seen. The extended family surrounded them, creating a circle of celebration that represented not just volleyball success, but the fulfillment of immigrant dreams and the power of quiet persistence. Coach Martinez found her in the chaos, pulling her aside for a moment that would define Hannah's memory of this day. "You found your voice," she said simply, "and it was worth waiting for." The trophy presentation felt surreal, with Hannah standing among teammates who had become family, holding hardware that represented more than just volleyball excellence. Media interviews followed, with reporters asking about her transformation from unknown defensive specialist to championship middle blocker. But Hannah's answers remained characteristically thoughtful, crediting her teammates, her coaches, her family's sacrifices. She'd learned to use her voice, but she'd never lost her humility or her recognition that individual success meant nothing without collective achievement. College recruiters who had ignored Hannah for 3 years suddenly discovered her film, drawn by performance metrics that told the story of a player who elevated her team's ceiling. Oregon State offered first, followed by Portland and several smaller Division I programs. But Hannah's decision wasn't just about volleyball, it was about finding a place where her academic interests could flourish alongside her athletic development. She chose Oregon State, staying close to home while pursuing the biomedical engineering degree that would eventually lead to medical school. Following in her parents' footsteps while forging her own path, 6 months later, at the team banquet, Hannah gave a speech that surprised everyone who remembered the quiet girl who'd barely spoken above a whisper. She talked about the power of patient preparation, about how being overlooked had taught her to find strength in observation and analysis. She thanked her teammates for teaching her that belonging isn't something you wait for, but something you earn through contribution. Most importantly, she shared the lesson that had defined her championship season. Sometimes the most powerful voices aren't the loudest ones, but the ones that speak at exactly the right moment with exactly the right words. The banner hanging in Sunset High's gym tells the story in simple terms: 2024, Oregon 6A state champions. But Hannah Kim's journey represents something deeper, proof that quiet strength can be as powerful as loud confidence. That being different doesn't mean being less than, and that sometimes the most important voices are the ones that take longest to find their way to the surface. Her story continues to inspire young athletes who feel overlooked, reminding them that champions aren't always born, sometimes they're carefully, quietly, persistently, built through years of preparation for moments that define not just seasons, but lives.